Welcome in to this week's edition of MISL Weekly. My name's Nicholas Murray. Very pleased to be joined as always by Chris Economides. Chris, how are you doing this week?
Nicholas, it's a pleasure as always, my friend.
Well, a lot of action to get to this past week and in the week coming up, but it was an interesting and a strange week where there was a lot of action, a lot of good goals, a lot of good games. But by the end of the weekend, everyone was kind of where they were at the start. It was a little bit of a musical chairs. The music stopped and everyone was exactly where they were before.
Balance. I mean, what else can you say? I mean, finally, Pennsylvania Roar with their big first win, a 16-0 whitewashing of the St. Louis Ambush. You know, Rochester comes up big against Syracuse with 42-year-old rookie Mark Sotilli. Syracuse goes in and beats Baltimore. Milwaukee and Kansas City take turns thrashing each other. Balance.
That was the thing, and I mean, I think the big games we were looking forward to this time last week were that home series between the Comets and the Wave, and the game between the Silver Knights and the Blast. And to start off with the Wave and the Comets, we were expecting, it certainly isn't a surprise to anyone, that these two teams split, both took victory at home. I think what was surprising maybe was the manner of the victories, because with Missouri coming out, handing the Wave a really, really tough defeat. I mean, Lucas Rodriguez with a hat-trick, really great performance, amongst a bunch of great performances for the Comets. I really felt as though there was some momentum there that they would be able to carry into US Cellular Arena on Saturday night. It felt like they did, but the Wave were able to weather that early pressure, weather that early storm, as we talked about last week, and suddenly there they are. Wave are able to get the goals at the right moments, and suddenly they're the ones that are pulling away from the Comets and returning the favor.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have asked me, you know, for the final scores of both those games, I would have told you, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they split, but it'd be a hell of a lot closer. So, you know, I think Milwaukee has been fighting. You know, there's games, the first game of the season in Kansas City where they fall behind, and then they claw back and they stay in the games. And they've had 2 or 3 victories like that. It just seemed like this game, you know, they just got so far behind. They said, you know, the heck with it. let's just focus on tomorrow night. And then they went back to Milwaukee and said, hey, you know what, we got spanked pretty good here. I think it's time to repay the favor, and sort of turn things around that way.
I think I'm pretty sure that Keith Tozer didn't take that attitude because of I can tell the amount of length of time that he left the 6th attacker out, which in a way let the Comets run up the score a little bit at the end of the game. Keith Tozer was not waving a white flag at all at the end of Friday night's game.
I don't think he was waving a white flag, but I think mentally.
But at the same time, we talked with Nick Pereira last week in the interview. He said that they were going to have to weather the Comets' early pressure, and they weren't able to do that in Missouri. They were able to do that in Milwaukee, and they were able to, and the results to a certain extent speak for themselves. The Comets, they are going to charge you. They are going to give you a hell of a time in the first quarter. Now, and if they get ahead, they're tough to come back on. But if Milwaukee gets ahead of you, they just as equally, they've got such a good defense. They have got such good goalkeepers. Marcel Feenstra again coming up big on Saturday night. In that game, they're very, very difficult to rally on. And I think that's the hallmarks of both teams, that it's tough to rally back if you fall into a hole against both.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody was waving a white flag. I just think mentally, once you fall so far behind, it's human nature to say, you know what, let's just look forward to the next game, and this one's in the books, and I think that's what happened. But again, not surprised by the fact that the team split. Was very surprised with the final scores.
Now, speaking of teams that aren't usually easy to rally back on, that's been a hallmark of the Baltimore Blast for a while. They are a team that very good defensively. They're obviously the best defensive team in the league so far this season, but the Syracuse Silver Knights were able to pull that off. They were able to come back from a 3-point deficit at the end of the third quarter, got the late winner by Bo Yelovac, as Machel Millward had a goal and an assist in the final 15 minutes to give his side a 9-8 victory against his former team. First of all, Huge performance by Millwood, tremendous stuff from him, and certainly I would expect gratifying to beat the Blast in the first meeting between the two teams this season. But we talked about it last week. How big a statement is this for Syracuse to beat Baltimore, having swept Missouri? Suddenly, we're really going to have to take this team seriously as a contender for when the playoffs come around.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this was probably their biggest win in their franchise history. I think if you look at the start that they've had, which is a tremendous start, I think when you factor in also that they had a very heartbreaking loss in Rochester on Friday night, when you factor all those things in, that if they would have lost this game, you would have seen the noose tightening a little bit. You would have, they would have had the sensation of, oh my God, here we go, we're floundering here, and all of a sudden, they're 7-5 or they're 7-6. They got to go back into Baltimore, and all of a sudden that lead is evaporating. What that win did was actually give them some breathing room. Obviously, a huge confidence boost. That they beat Baltimore in a very important game. They sort of climbed that hurdle. So hats off to Tommy Tanner, who I think has done a tremendous job this year. My opinion, coach of the year so far for what he's done with that team. So it was a huge win for Syracuse.
Now, you mentioned the game against Rochester on the Friday night, and that was obviously a big win for Rochester, just to end the 9-game winning streak that the Silver Knights had in that series. But it was also a heck of a game. I mean, it was very close, I think, between that game and between the game between Syracuse and Baltimore as to which was the better game this weekend. Because end of first quarter, Syracuse is ahead. Halftime, Rochester's ahead. End of the third quarter, Syracuse is ahead. Full time, Rochester has managed to take the victory, grab the win. It was such a great back and forth contest between those two rivals, and terrific advert for the MISL overall.
You know what? Hats off to Soccer Sam and Rich Randall and the entire Lancer organization there. Tremendous crowd, close to 8,000 people.
Well over 7,800 there.
It looked phenomenal on the broadcast. And then, you got to give the Lancers, the head coach Josh Reif, a lot of credit. And congratulations to 42-year-old rookie Mark Sotilli. Here's a guy that I'll go back about 20 years when we started the Rhinos. He first came out and tried out for the Rhinos back 20 years ago. But the guy just keeps plugging along. He's followed his dream. He's wanted to play professional soccer. He finally got his chance. And you know what? He stepped up. His teammates played hard for him. Great guy. So congratulations to Mark Sotilli and the Lancers on obviously a huge win that keeps their playoff hopes alive, but more importantly gives them a confidence boost.
From what I understand, Sotilli had been playing for their reserve team in the last couple, and certainly this past fall, trying to stay in shape, stay sharp, and it's huge for him just to have that opportunity to come in and especially to be the guy in goal when you snap your biggest rival's winning streak. Got to be a massive thrill.
You know what? In any other sport, the story of a 42-year-old rookie goalkeeper coming in and getting his first win would have been a huge story. So, no, I mean, you know what? It's a feel-good story. It's something that, it's like a fairy tale where if you keep working hard enough, working long enough at what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to get there. So you know what? Congratulations to Mark and the entire Lancer team.
Now, we had the 42-year-old rookie star for the Lancers. We had the 41-year-old veteran star for the Pennsylvania Roar in their victory against the St. Louis Ambush. Peter Pappas, the veteran goalkeeper, formerly of the Philadelphia Kicks, former MISL goalkeeper of the year, I believe, and just 32 saves. People are going to look at that 16-0 scoreline and think, what happened there? Because, I mean, the Roar blew them out. The Ambush had 55 shots. Pappas had to make 32 saves. They blocked another 23. This was a very, very up and down, very entertaining game. And the Ambush just somehow could not find the back of the net and couldn't make the difference. And then in the fourth quarter, the Roar pull away in front of a great crowd, more than 4,500, I think, on hand at the Santander Arena to see the first victory in franchise history for Pennsylvania.
You know what? Congratulations to the Roar. Peter Pappas, a little bit different than Mark Sotilli here.
A little bit of experience.
Yeah, a little bit of experience there. He's been through the wars. Obviously, been a great indoor keeper, throughout the years. But you know what? Still, the man is 41 years old. Anybody that can play at that level, with that intensity and with that talent, at 41 years old, you got to give a lot of credit to. And congratulations to Eric Poulos and the entire Roar team. They didn't make some of the mistakes they've been making as an expansion team throughout the match. St. Louis played hard, as you mentioned, 32 shots. They obviously pulled the keeper, had the sixth attacker, so the score ran up a little bit at the end, but a well-deserved victory. And you know what? They could play spoiler, down the stretch here.
It was some of the other thing, in addition to obviously Pappas's performance and two very good performances by Pete Rowley and Corey Marrett, who both had a pair of goals. You look at some of the newcomers that have been brought in the last couple of weeks, and for me, the guy that really stood out was Max Touloute. You formerly played for the Wichita Wings, and he came in and he just had a really nice game, just playing from box to box in the midfield, scored a terrific goal, and he's just a guy that's going to come in and just provide a little bit more experience and provide a little bit of edge in the midfield for them, so that to complement guys like Chris Williams, Petar Myers, Marrett, Rowley, and the guys that are really coming in. Kingsley Onwuka, another guy who's coming in, a little bit of experience, played for the Baltimore Bohemians in the PDL, and just adding these little pieces that are just adding to the Roar's roster as they look to close out the season with a strong final run.
It takes time, Nicholas. It takes time to get the experience. You look at some of the other expansion teams over the course of the past 2 or 3 years, the Rochesters, the Syracuses. We had Virginia, a few years back. It takes time until they get acclimated to the indoor game. We've had some, St. Louis being an expansion team this year. If they didn't have the knowledge that a Daryl Duran has, they've sort of cut that process a little bit shorter. Yeah. But again, there's no experience like experience. So
exactly right.
Henceforth, in due time, just as Pennsylvania has found out now, they're playing. You're seeing the scores become closer, and hats off to them with their first win.
Now, as we mentioned, one of the guys with major experience on that team is goalkeeper Peter Pappas, and we were fortunate enough to talk to him this week about his shutout and the remainder of the Roar season. And that interview will be coming up just after this break. Well, I'm very pleased to be joined now by the goalkeeper for the Pennsylvania Roar, Peter Pappas. Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure, Nicholas. Thanks for having me.
First of all, congratulations on the inaugural win in franchise history. For you, and especially I think for some of your younger teammates, that's got to have been a huge thrill on Sunday afternoon.
It was definitely nice to get a victory. It took us much longer than we anticipated. But things are coming together, some personnel changes, and it was a great effort Sunday. Everybody did their jobs effectively, and we were lucky to come out with a shutout.
You talk about some of the new personnel that's being brought in, and it's been noticeable, to me at least, in the last couple of games. Guys like Max Touloute coming in, Kingsley Onwuka coming in, and really adding something to the team immediately.
Yeah, they're quality players. They play with a lot of energy. So even if it's a case where the indoor game is not as natural to them as far as the movements on and off the ball, their energy makes up for that. And it just, there's just certain guys that we're getting a lot of minutes that just weren't ready, I don't think, at this time for to be playing at this level. I think they just need to groom themselves a bit. So they're not on the field as much, and these guys have come in and stepped up and done a great job. We had Kevin Coleman back. We had Angel Revillo back in the lineup. Tom Myers has been our best player all season long, so we had a full roster for the first time.
Getting guys like Angel, getting guys like Petar Myers and Chris Williams in that lineup, what have you guys tried to impart to the younger players in the locker room, especially those who are coming to the indoor game for the first time?
That it's just a different mentality has to take place, especially for guys that have been attacking players most of their career. You can't just be an attacking player in this league. You have to defend and stay with your guy. You turn your back for a second, it only takes a few feet of space for someone to get a shot off in indoors, and once you're in that attacking third, anything is in striking distance. So it's just a matter of getting guys to stay focused for their entire shift, I think, is the biggest issue with a lot of the young guys.
You've obviously been a long-time standout in the MISL, playing back for the Philadelphia Kicks and some other franchises in the past. What was it that attracted you to come back to the game with the Raw?
Mostly was my kids, actually. I spoke to Todd Hofford, who's our assistant and a good friend of mine, a former teammate, and he was speaking to me about Sonny Namowski and Angel Revilla, but some of the guys that were interested in playing in the summer, and he was just asking me about their pedigree and their backgrounds, and kind of said jokingly to me, "Why don't you come back and play?" And I laughed it off, and I said to my wife that Todd posed that to me. She said, "Well, you should. The kids would love it." So we spoke about it a bit, and it's kind of the biggest reason was that the kids could see me play. My youngest was 4 when I retired, so doesn't really have a recollection.
So are you enjoying it?
I am. It's a little tougher on the body than I thought. I didn't think it was going to be easy, but every game, it's just my groins and my right quadricep is not doing very well. So aside from the first game of the season, I haven't felt very good physically, aside from going into that first game. But I'll get over it.
This weekend, this Friday night, you guys have a game coming up against the Rochester Lancers. You're actually going to likely be going up against a goalkeeper who's not only a rookie, but a year older than you in Mark Satilli. Is that kind of fun to see a guy like him come into the pro ranks at his age? And he was able to earn his first win in the MISL last weekend.
I think it's great. It's always nice not to be the oldest guy out there. That's why, Dougie Miller's usually out there too. It makes me feel good about myself. But, actually seeing him last year have such great success, when I was thinking about coming back, I thought about how well Doug did last year in Rochester. And, I thought, maybe I still can do it. But no, it's a great story. With him getting his first victory as well, it'll be a matchup of, guys that are 80 years old plus combined. So it'll be pretty cool.
What's the biggest thing that you're hoping to build off from that win against the Ambush as you take on the Raw and then the Silver Knights this weekend?
The one thing I said to the guys after the locker room after the game was the amount of energy and intensity it took, to get that victory, to close down shooters, to defend in the box. So that's what it takes, game in, game out, in order to be successful in the MISL. You can't, sort of walk through shifts. You can't take a quarter off. You have to play at lightning speed with hyper intensity from the first whistle to the last whistle. So hopefully the guys recognize that this is the first game that was really played at that level, and there was success to be found. So if they can sort of bottle that and take it with them every game, I think we'll be a handful. I'm not going to say we're going to obviously win out the rest of the season, but we'll be competitive from here on out and win some games.
So you feel as though maybe that the thing clicked, the light switch went on, as it were, and just for the guys to not only put out that effort, be rewarded for it. Yeah,
well, it's two parts really. It's the effort and it's having the personnel. And Tyrone Hill was a huge addition as well with him. He's a strong guy. He's quick. He's good with the ball. So there was an addition of 3 guys in the lineup that weren't there with the welcoming back of Angel and Kevin Coleman, who have missed a few games. So the fact that the roster was a little more bolstered and the effort was there from everybody, all the young guys, was great.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Congratulations on being named Player of the Week this week, and I know the Raw fans, all 4,500 that were in attendance, certainly sounded like they were having a great time on Sunday afternoon. And best of luck this weekend.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
Obviously an outstanding performance by not just Peter Pappas, but the Raw as a whole against St. Louis. And this Friday night, They return to action at Santander Arena again. Rochester Lancers are coming into town. This was a game that I was looking at that maybe if there was going to be a game before this past weekend, if the Raw were going to grab a win, this might be the one. Certainly something to build on, but Rochester's coming in off a high of beating Syracuse. I think there could be a lot of goals in this game.
Well, first, I'm going to get back to Peter Pappas. Great performance. Good little Greek boy here, so it makes us all of us Greeks very, very proud. He's still playing at age 41. So hats off to Peter. But, if you look back, look forward for the Roar schedule, you would have thought that this Rochester game might be the one that sort of breaks the schnoz for them. I think Rochester now has found, a revived confidence.
Yep.
I think Mark Sotilli gets better and better with each passing game. Should be a very interesting matchup, though, with obviously the Lancers going in there, for a huge game. They still believe that they can make the playoffs. They're still in the playoff hunt. If Missouri and Syracuse, lose a couple here and there, Rochester still has Syracuse. I believe it's twice more.
That's correct. Yes.
During the course of this season, Syracuse has got Baltimore at least three more times.
3 more times, yes.
So anything can happen there. So a huge game here all of a sudden.
Now, speaking of Syracuse and Baltimore, they get a rematch of Sunday's thriller on Friday night. That kind of the highlight of the evening, I think, at Baltimore Arena. What are the lessons that both teams are going to have taken away from Sunday's game that they're going to try and apply this Friday?
Well, if going back to year one, I was absolutely shocked when Syracuse went in their first road game ever and beat the Baltimore Blast in Baltimore. I don't know if they've won ever since then. So
I think you're right about. I think they might have won a couple of times against Baltimore their first season, but I believe it was a 7-game losing streak that they snapped on Sunday against the Blast.
So again, when you look at, I think that they've proven that they belong in that echelon now, with a couple of wins against Missouri, with a win against Baltimore. There's no doubt that Syracuse can play with anybody in the league. I think Baltimore's going to be in a very ornery mood after losing the game in Syracuse. I can't remember the last time that the Blast lost 2 in a row. So it's going to be a real uphill battle for Syracuse.
Definitely has been a while since that's happened. I think it might be going back to not this past year's championship, but the 2011-12 championship, where they fell in a pair of games to the Milwaukee Wave. That might be as long as it's been for the Blast having a 2-game losing streak.
Did I say that properly, Nicholas?
I think you did.
Okay.
I think you did. I think
ornery. Yeah.
Ornery.
Ornery.
You've got to get the R in there.
Ornery. Okay.
Ornery.
All right. Okay. Well, they're going to be in a foul mood.
They're going to be in a foul mood.
Okay.
That'll do. Yeah. So also Friday night we have the St. Louis Ambush visiting the Missouri Comets, and they finish off their 4-game road trip this weekend with a visit to Missouri and a visit to Milwaukee. For a team that's where they are right now, those are not 2 venues that they want to go and visit. I think the question is, can Darryl Duran get his team feeling confident again? Can he get his team feeling confident about itself again after, as we mentioned, only scoring 1 goal in the past 2 in the 2 games this past weekend?
I certainly hope so, because if you could choose 2 worse venues to go in after a 2-game disappointing road trip, those would be the 2 venues that I would choose. The scores could get really, really ugly here.
Could be tough.
Unless things get turned around very quickly by Coach Duran.
The thing I would be doing if I were Coach Duran, and I'm curious to know if he's done this. What I would be doing with the guys this week, I'd be doing the regular training. Just go through your regular routine, but I'd also be getting them into the tape room. Show them some clips of things when things have gone right for them. Show them clips of them scoring goals against the Wave. Show them clips of them scoring against the Comets. Kind of instill a little bit of confidence. Say, yeah, you know what? We can go out and compete with these guys. We're not the team that we were this past weekend. We're better than this. Let's go out and show people that we are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think when you look at the fact that when they played Missouri the first time, it was awful. I mean, Missouri went into St. Louis and totally manhandled them. The same thing with with Milwaukee the first time that the Milwaukee played against Missouri in Milwaukee. Then the return matches, obviously very, very different story. So I think Daryl Duran had the proper game plan. Again, it's going to be tough. Make no bones about it. I mean, they're coming off a really tough Eastern swing. You're looking at two teams that can score goals in bunches. We'll see what transpires.
Also on Saturday night, we have the Eastern Bloc, as it were, they re-pair off with Rochester going to visit Baltimore and Syracuse hosting Pennsylvania. I'm kind of interested by this Rochester-Baltimore game, because Baltimore, if they go out and they beat Syracuse on Friday night, and Rochester goes out and beats Pennsylvania, Rochester's going to be coming in on a high 2-game winning streak, and there could be the opportunity for maybe a slight letdown for Baltimore. I mean, this is a Rochester team that's never beaten the Blast, as far as I believe I'm correct in saying that. This could be the chance for the Lancers to break their duck at Baltimore Arena.
Well, just as Syracuse has had that monumental "we've arrived" victory. Rochester's beaten Milwaukee, I believe, one time, but they still have not beat them last season.
Yes,
and until they say that they've beaten Baltimore, they really can't claim themselves to be in that echelon. So I think with some of the renewed excitement and confidence, if they get a good result in Pennsylvania, they could be going in on a high. As you mentioned, Baltimore, depending on what happens with Syracuse, could be a little bit, on a high themselves. Interesting matchup.
Definitely an interesting matchup.
That's probably the one game this weekend that I'll be paying close attention to.
And all of those games, as always, will be available live on YouTube, and immediately after the games, most of them will archive very quickly, we've noticed. So if you're out at the game, out at the arena that night, you should get the opportunity to come home, check out the full game, or just use the DVR function to click through and check out some of the goals you saw earlier that night. We hope you'll join us on YouTube. We hope you'll join us on Friday for the MISL weekend preview on the MISL YouTube channel. But Chris, any particular players that you're watching this weekend? Who's going to be the key guy?
I'll be focusing more on the Eastern matchups this weekend. I think after this weekend we could either have clear distinction as to who's going to finish where, or we could have a brand new race. I'm intrigued by the Mark Sotilli story. I really, really am. Maybe because I talked to my friend Sam a lot, but I'm really intrigued to see how he does. As he, faces Pennsylvania on Friday, and then Baltimore on Saturday. I'll be curious to see how he does and see how the Lancers do.
Well, you're taking the Eastern Bloc. I'll go over to the Midwest. And we talked about the St. Louis ambush and trying to reinvigorate themselves, restore some confidence. A guy that can do that, and a guy that I think has not necessarily lost much confidence, is O'Dane Sinclair. If he can get back into the scoring groove, that's going to be a huge boost for the ambush as they go into two very, very tough places to play.
That's an excellent choice. Yeah, I guess he, as is the rest of the ambush team, have been very, very quiet over the past couple of games, obviously. So, yeah, he's a strong player, and if he can get on track, that'll bode well for St. Louis.
Well, we hope you'll join us for the weekend preview on Friday on the MISL YouTube channel. As always, we hope you join us for all of the games. Jump into the live chat to interact with other fans and sometimes myself. And we'll see you this time next week for the next edition of MISL Weekly. Thanks to producer Seth for putting this together. Thanks for joining me again, Chris.
It's always a pleasure. And look at that Witkowitz. Isn't he just a sharp-dressed young man?
He is a very sharp-dressed young man. And thank you guys for listening this week. Until next week, bye for now.